In June of 1968, a month after graduating from Macalester College, I was drafted to fight a war I hated. I was 21 years old, young, yes, and politically naive, but even so, the American war in Vietnam seemed to me wrong. I felt no personal danger. I felt no sense of impending crisis in my life. Stupidly, with a kind of smug removal that I can even begin to fathom, I assumed that the problems of killing and dying did not fall within my special province. The draft notice arrived on June 17th, 1968. It was a humid afternoon, I remember, cloudy and very quiet, and I had just come in from a round of golf. My mother and father were having lunch out in the kitchen. I remember opening the letter, scanning the first few lines, feeling the blood go thick behind my eyes. I remember a sound in my head. It wasn't thinking, just a silent howl. A million things, all at once. I was too good for this war. Too smart, too compassionate, too everything. It couldn't happen. I was above it. I had the world dicked. Phi, Beta, Kappa, and summa cum laude, and president of the student body, and a full ride scholarship for grad school at Harvard. I was no soldier. The sight of blood made me queasy, and I couldn't tolerate authority, and I didn't know a rifle from a slingshot. I was a liberal, for Christ's sakes. If they needed fresh bodies, why not draft some Back to the Stone Age hawk, or some dumb jingo in his hard hat and bomb Hanoi button, or one of LBJ's pretty daughters, or Westmoreland's whole handsome family, nephews and nieces and baby grandson. There should be a law, I thought. If you support the war, if you think it's worth the price, that's fine. But you have to put your own precious fluids on the line. I remember the rage in my stomach. Later it burned down to a smoldering self-pity, then to numbness. At dinner that night, my father asked what my plans were. Nothing, I said. Wait. In the evenings, I'd sometimes borrow my father's car and drive aimlessly around town, feeling sorry for myself, thinking about the war and the pig factory, and how my life seemed to be collapsing towards slaughter. The government had ended most graduate school deferments. The waiting list for the National Guard and Reserves was impossibly long. My health was solid. I did not qualify for CO status. No religious grounds. No history as a pacifist. Moreover, I could not be opposed to the war as a matter of general principle. There were occasions, I believed, when a nation was justified in using its military force to achieve its ends, to stop a Hitler, or some comparably evil force. And I told myself that in such circumstances, I would have willingly marched off to the battle. The problem, though, was that a draft board did not let you choose your war. Beyond all this, or at the very center, was the raw fact of terror. I did not want to die, not ever, but certainly not then, not there, not in the wrong war. I imagined myself doing things I could not do, charging an enemy position, taking aim at another human being. His jaw was in his throat, his upper lip and teeth were gone, his one eye was shut, his other eye was a star-shaped hole, his eyebrows were thin and arched like a woman's, his nose was undamaged, there was a slight tear at the lobe of one ear, his clean black hair was swept upward into a cowlick at the rear of his skull. His forehead was lightly freckled, his fingernails were clean, the skin at the left cheek was peeled back into 3 ragged strips, his right cheek was smooth and hairless. There was a butterfly on his chin, his neck was open to the spinal cord and the blood there was thick and shiny, and this was the wound that had killed him. He had lay faced up in the center of the trail, a slim, dead, almost dainty young man. He had bone legs, a narrow waist, long shapely fingers. His chest was sunken and poorly muscled, a scholar maybe. His wrists were the wrists of a child. He wore a black shirt, black pajama pants, and a gray ammunition belt. A gold ring on the 3rd finger of his right hand. His rubber sandals had been blown off. One lay beside him, the other a few meters up the trail. He had been born, maybe, in 1946, in the village of Mai Khe near the central coastline of Quang Najai province, where his parents farmed and where his family had lived for several centuries, where during the time of the French his father and 2 uncles and many neighbors had joined in the struggle for independence. He was not a communist, he was a citizen and a soldier. In the village of Mai Khe, as in all of the Quang Ngai, the patriotic resistance had the force of tradition, which was partly the force of legend, and from his earliest boyhood the man I killed would have listened to stories about the heroic Trung sisters and Tran Huang Dao's famous rout of the Mongols, and Li Lao's final victory against the Chinese at Ta Dang. He would have been taught that to defend the land was a man's highest duty and the highest privilege. He had to accept this. It was never open to question. Secretly, though, it had also frightened him. He was not a fighter. He hoped the Americans would go away. The young man would have not wanted to be a soldier, and in his heart would have feared performing badly in battle. Even as a boy growing up in the village of Mai Khe, he had often worried about this. He imagined covering his head and lying deep in a hole and closing his eyes and not moving until the war was over. He had no stomach for violence.